Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. With the name of God, most gracious, most compassionate. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, wa rahmatullah, and the mercy of God, wa barakatuhu, and his blessings. We'd like to welcome you to another segment of Al-Islam in Focus, a program whereby we strive to bring to our viewing audience the beauty and dignity of the religion of Islam in a very sober and practical manner. As you know, as we've been teaching for the last few months now, Al-Islam is a very universal religion, and this religion is a religion whereby it's not narrow-minded, where the believers are supposed to stay in the mosque, or anyone who's a believer is supposed to stay in the church or the synagogues, but religion is a religion whereby you're supposed to go out and do outreach programs. God says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, and we have made dignified every single person, every single child of Adam. So this is our focus for the programs that we have, that we're trying to let everyone know that every single person is dignified and that they should be treated with justice and respect, enjoying freedom, justice, and equality. All of the prophets and messengers of God, that was their sole purpose, to guide humanity towards a better way of life, a more peaceful way of life, a more just way of life. So today I'm so honored to have Dr. Alice Green, the director of the Center of Law and Justice, because she personifies what those prophets represented, and that is the seeking of justice for every single person. So Dr. Green, I'm really honored to have you, and welcome to Al-Islam in Focus.
No, thank you.
Dr. Green, I'm going to get right into it because I know you have to leave. Well, let me just state this. I arrived in Albany in 1990, and the first thing I read about you is that you used to jog miles and miles every single day, and that impressed me. You know, so I want to ask you now, how many miles were you jogging then, and are you still jogging, and what has it done for you in your work?
Well, I was doing about 6 to 8 miles a day.
Wow.
I've run the New York City Marathon, and running was very important to me. I do it early in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up at 5 o'clock and I'm on the streets for a couple of reasons. It clears your mind. It allows you to think. I write in my mind while I'm running. I think about decisions that I have to make. I think about the injustice and how it bothers me and what can I do about it. And I always had this dream, because I found running so important, I wanted to try to get something started inside. I'm very concerned about prison, when we imprison people. And a lot of my very close friends that I've developed over the years are people who taught me about the criminal justice system. I always wanted to have a program inside the prisons that would allow people who are incarcerated to develop running.
Wow.
And I saw recently that someone actually did that. My dream came true, and that one young man was teaching others to run, so that you can. I think people need that time to,
Yes, they do.
be in touch with their inner self or their spirit or whatever it happens to be. And running can do that. And if you don't run, you can walk.
Okay.
So I'm still out there every morning about 5 o'clock because it is very helpful to me.
And you still run 6 to 8 miles?
Well, I don't run that much anymore.
Okay.
I do a lot of walking
Good.
too.
Okay,
walking is
wonderful.
just as good.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's an excellent exercise.
Yeah.
Dr. Green, I'm interested in knowing your concept. How important is the concept of justice in the society?
Well, it's obviously it's very, very important, because I don't think if we treat one person unjustly, I think it destroys our whole system, and that justice has to be based on individual. Even Dr. Martin Luther King recognized that, is that if you have to consider individuals. You can't make, for instance, we have in a criminal justice system mandatory sentencing and zero tolerance policies in our schools, which means that everyone, no matter what's going on with you, will be treated in a certain kind of way based on that approach and philosophy. And I think that's wrong, because we as human beings are individuals, and that so many different things happen to us. I find myself not being able to blame necessarily an individual for things that a society creates. We have institution of racism, and because of that, you will be treated in such a way that does not allow you to take full advantage of the resources in this country, in your community. And so unless we think about what we as a nation or as a community do to people, and racism is a major problem.
Definitely.
And it's in all of our institutions. It's in housing, economics, criminal justice, health, all of those things. So when someone gets treated differently or not allowed to have the opportunity to enjoy the resources of this community, then that's unjust.
Of course.
And it hurts the rest of the community. Unfortunately, they don't realize it. So when you put a young child in prison because he was born into a situation where his family could not purchase good housing or other kinds of services, and that created a situation for this young child, how can I blame that child? We have to look at the community and the institutions that govern it.
Exactly. Well, hopefully this is good news, Dr. Green. Yesterday in today's New York Post, I read an article by Governor Cuomo whereby he insists that he will not pass a state budget unless he can first sign the criminal justice reform bill together with it. And he's stating that basically, and I'm going to name a few major points of this article, and I'd like you to comment on it. Tell me what you think about it. The first provision is that he's telling us that 3/4 of people held in New York City jails are awaiting trial, as well as statewide, and most arrested are given trial dates and released. For others, their freedom comes down to just simply money. For others, and if they have it, they can post bail. If not, they have to wait until trial. And the overwhelming number of people are Black and Latino people who don't have money. And you mentioned that in your last segment, you touched on it. So he wants this corrected totally, and I just want your comments.
Well, I'm very happy that he's taken that stance.
I am too.
We've been working on this issue for many, many years. Last year we had a major bail reform forum in the city of Albany, and people came out and talked about how it impacted their lives. But it does come down to race and money. There's no reason to hold someone in jail when they have not been convicted of anything. They're just sitting there because they don't have the money to pay their bail.
Exactly.
Other people can not even see the door of a jail because they can be freed because they happen to have the money. And the other thing is that when you're in jail because you don't have bail, not only is it a problem regarding money and freedom, but it can affect your defense.
Yes, exactly.
You know, a lot of people will plead guilty. Most of the people who are sentenced or convicted, 95% of them, by the way, do not go to trial. And there are a lot of people who sit in jail and say, hey, you know, I'll plead guilty so I can get out of here sooner. You know, and it could affect a jury trial. I mean, when you're in jail and you go before a court and a jury, and they can see you in handcuffs or whatever happens, clothing that will identify you as someone, you assume that they are guilty.
Yes.
So there are a lot of problems that people encounter because they cannot meet bail. We have to think about families and children, and even one day in jail can be horrific. You might lose your job, you know, and I always think about children and what, you know, how it affects them. So yes, I support the governor wholeheartedly because it is a major issue, and the racial disparity is quite obvious.
Oh, definitely.
Not only the bail, but who ends up in prison.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Another provision, Dr. Green, of the bill is the speed up of judicial process. He says under our bill, courts should take a more proactive role on cutting down on the frequency and the length of postponements, disturbing the lives of people for months and years on end. That there's too many postponements, and he's trying to cut that down all the way into zero, which I think is a wonderful thing also as well, because I've known that from some family members of mine. Been postponed, they have to come back, postpone and come back, and it's terrible.
It's horrible. And yes, and again, that could have a great impact on not only individual, but families and communities. And you can be in jail for many, many months.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, there are cases of people being there a couple of 3 years waiting for their particular case to be disposed of. And it can affect you psychologically, and it destroys the hope in people. So a speedy trial is another one that we're really concerned about.
Definitely. When I started working for the criminal justice, I was a chaplain in the prisons together with Ma'am Kadir, the one who had interviewed you on the last segment. I was telling the inmates who were life, because I'm new to it, you know, so I told them, well, you know, I went to jail too. I spent one day in the tombs looking for my brother who had a disciplinary problem. So they looked at me and all of them started laughing, right? One day in the tombs, that's nothing. But I tried to tell them that one day was enough for me never to see jail again. I mean, that really straightened out my life.
Oh yeah, I was at one prison and something was happening with the locks. I went there I did a lot of work in prison with for a long time.
I'd heard.
I've been banned, by the way, which is not my fault. But at any rate, the locks, they were having trouble with the lock, and so I was not able to leave exactly at the time that I thought I was going to be able to leave. And it was only a few minutes. And I said, no way.
That was enough for you.
That was enough for me. And I don't think people realize that, because our prisons are closed institutions.
Yes, they are.
People don't see them. You know, they're far away, and they think that something good is happening. They think that people are being rehabilitated, you know, and all the other positive things that they can come up with. But it's not. Prisons are toxic institutions.
Yes, they are.
They create anger. They are unhealthy.
Yes,
so when people come back out into our community, many of them could have gotten ill while they're incarcerated.
Of course.
And many of them are not treated well, so some of them commit suicide. So there are all kinds of problems connected with prison, and it doesn't promote public safety.
No,
that's the big issue. We spend a lot of money on incarcerating people, but it does not work.
You're right.
But you know, so many people don't understand that, and they think it's okay. But since I'm a prison abolitionist, and I'm also a slavery abolitionist, and they both look the same to me. So I would not put people in prisons, and certainly not in prisons as they exist today. I think we have to find a new way of dealing with behavior.
A more merciful way of detaining people. I definitely agree with you. I agree. Now here's something I learned that I don't even think viewing audience knows, Dr. And that's why I told you when I did research for you, I'm learning so much about this criminal justice system. The governor states that New York is one of 10 states whereby prosecutors can withhold basic evidence like police
Discovery.
reports, witness statements from defendants until the day of the trial.
That's right.
The other 40 states, that doesn't even exist. So if the defendant should have a right to counsel, but how can they have a right to counsel meaningfully
Right.
if they don't have time to prepare a defense?
Right, and the counsel
were
can't
you
even get the
aware of this?
information.
'Cause
Oh, yes, discovery is one of the other issues. It was proposed last year, but it went nowhere. But that's just another way that we treat people unfairly in the
Yes.
system, is
Yeah.
they should have that right to information
Of course.
that prosecutors have. But prosecutors want to protect themselves, and they want to guarantee a conviction by withholding information, and that is criminal.
Of course that is.
So I'm, we've been supportive of the governor's proposals since he introduced them last year.
Wonderful.
And we've been working with people in New York and other places to try to make sure those 3 pieces of legislation get passed.
Wonderful. So now he's stating if he can't get these bills done, there won't be any budget. Now that comes down to money. So I think now maybe the legislators are going to start thinking
Yeah.
first, and maybe I think they will get this bill passed finally
Yes.
through the efforts of yourself and others as well who've just been fighting for it for years, Dr. Green. So I'm so glad to hear this. Lastly, you stated in the last segment that the incarcerated inmates in Vermont and Maine can vote while in prison. Now, this is new to me.
Not only can they vote in Vermont and Maine, but most of the European countries allow people who are incarcerated to vote.
Wow.
There's no reason why. Well, I know the reason why, and again, it's in New York State, for instance, for a long time, until 2010, people who were incarcerated were counted as citizens of the particular community they were incarcerated in. And this allowed certain people to breeze into the legislature because they didn't have to go out and do the same kind of campaigning because they were assured a vote. They had a smaller number of people that they were representing, and they weren't not representing the people who were incarcerated. And also those communities were getting money from the federal government based on the per capita income of that particular community. So you added prisons in there, and mean you got more money. So it's always been an issue of money.
Always,
and
always.
and I think you're right. A lot of people don't know that. But yes, there's no reason why people who are incarcerated shouldn't be represented and be allowed to vote.
That's right, exactly. Currently, I want to ask you, Dr. Gunn, I don't know. Can newly freed inmates, are they able to vote if they're on parole or probation? Some people say yes, some people say
That's
no.
been an issue that we've been working on for so long because there was such confusion in New York State and around the country because there's so many different models. In some states like Florida, you were permanently barred from voting. Permanently barred from voting. In New York State, you could not vote while you're incarcerated on a felony in prison, and you could not vote if you're on parole. Now, the governor issued an executive order last year, I think it was last year, which would allow people who are on parole to register to vote.
Okay, they can
And so
vote then.
they can do that now, basically.
Good.
But it created so much confusion because some states let people who didn't allow people who were on probation, didn't allow people who were on parole, permanently barred. All it was a wide mixture, and so it was confusing. Judges didn't understand the law
Even
either.
judges didn't understand.
No, I've been on panels where judges thought that you could vote when you're on parole.
Wow.
I've also had legislators call me up and say, I'd like to introduce a bill that would allow people who are on probation to vote. And I said, that would be going backwards because you can vote when you're on probation.
I don't feel so bad being
Oh,
ignorant,
no.
Dr. Green.
Very few people understood the law in New York State.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Dr. Green, would you speak about Miss Vera Michelson, who
Oh.
I understand just recently passed?
Yeah, Vera, who's called Mike by all of her friends, and anybody who knows her, she insists on being called Mike, was a friend and an associate, someone, a warrior for justice. And I knew her for maybe 45 years. Wow. We've been, working together. She was a dear friend, but most importantly, she was an incredible activist for justice, social justice, and she never veered from that. It's hard to actually categorize her because she was everything that you could imagine in a great human being. Wow. And unfortunately, we lost her last Saturday because she had cancer, and we all miss her terribly. And I think this community will learn, if they haven't already, what a great loss her death has been to this community. So yes, she's a dear friend and a worker for justice, and I'm fortunate that I knew her and that I was able to work with her, and so was the entire community.
I used to confuse her with the mayor, because she looked like the mayor. She was the same size. And
oh, I've heard that before.
Well, she came to one of our fundraisers about maybe 3-4 years ago, and I was trying to get the panel to recognize the mayor. So I said, the mayor's here. So everyone looked at me like I was crazy. So she came up to me and said, no, I get that all the time. I'm not the mayor.
Yeah,
My
she
name
did.
is so
Yeah, because I've heard it before. They were also close friends as well. Right? Yeah, and she was into everything. Vera was into everything. She served this community in such amazing ways. So we will never forget her.
Is her funeral?
They are planning a memorial service. I think next month. So it'll be announced. But
we'll definitely get it on our show.
Yeah, because she just died Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Great loss.
Yes, it is. Ms. Green, we don't have much time. Share whatever you'd like to share to our viewing audience, like we did last segment. Anything that you would like to speak about that you feel that the audience needs to know concerning your great work that you're doing.
I do want to mention Yasir.
Yassin Arafat, yes.
I met him, maybe 17 years ago. He was a wonderful member of our community. Yes, and after, 9/11, things got a little crazy, and we were out to incarcerate anybody who looked like they were Muslim or immigrant in any way. And he got caught in a trap. Was totally innocent. I was at his trial. I was so pained by what happened at that trial, and that he was incarcerated for 15 years. We have been corresponding for those 15 years. An incredible loss to this community.
Yes, he was.
I loved his poetry. He's a great thinker and doer.
Yes,
and I'm really afraid, and people need to understand that, because now we're in a situation where we're we're being led to treat people who are immigrants, in the most outrageous way that really harms everybody. That be careful. Make sure we as a community are protecting people who might be immigrants in this community, and that they're they're not the enemy. They're not the criminals that everybody fears. They're good, honest people who this country was founded and developed with people from everywhere, and not to welcome people who want to come to this country is outrageous.
Yes, it is.
But we have to make sure that we, as a community, are looking at what's going on and acting to prevent the kind of thing that happened to the imam 15 years ago. And I think now he's awaiting, if he hasn't already been deported.
Yeah, I think he is
Yeah.
awaiting
So
that, you know.
great loss to me.
Yes, it is. I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Green, because in the Quran, one of the verses says that we have made you into so many communities, nations, and tribes, not to hate and despise each other, but to get to know one another. And this is what we try to propagate out in the community, on our broadcasts, and I'm glad you raised that. Because narrow-minded thinking always leads to harm and destruction.
Right.
But if you can start thinking more openly and more embracing of humanity, you know,
yeah.
that will always take us in a more
Right.
positive way.
Yeah,
So,
because I feel I lose something when I'm not meeting and working with and involving myself with people from different walks of life.
me too.
It was my great joy to know him, but I still have this pain connected with how this country dealt with him,
Oh, yeah.
and is now dealing with immigrants generally.
Definitely. We have 2 minutes, Dr. Green. Is there any one last point that you'd
Well,
like
I
to
would
speak
like to invite people to be involved with the Center for Law and Justice.
Yes, definitely.
We're at 220 Green Street, and we're open,
220 Green Street.
and we are happy to have people visit and to be involved with any of the programs that we do, because we found that there's a great need for the community to be talking about and discussing issues of concern. We just recently did a film series, which we do on an annual basis, where we have 4 films through the month of February, and we show them at the Housing Authority and have dinner together.
Oh, I
and
missed that. You
yeah,
should come to
and
'em.
discuss
Oh, God.
and have a discussion to do each film.
Yes.
And
yes,
so
I
it's a
remember
great
that.
program, and the Housing Authority wants us to do more with film, but it's a great way of getting people together to eat together, share food, and have great discussions about the issues that are affecting our community. And one of the discussions we had this year was Elazar Williams.
Yes.
We discussed the film, and it was a good way to get him back into the community and involved, since he is unfortunately paralyzed.
Sure. Yes, I understand. We're almost at the end. Let me just say to our viewing audience, we hope you understood and enjoyed and got so much valuable information from Dr. Green. You know, our slogan is we're trying to bring humanity together in moral excellence with truth and understanding. And we're just so happy to have had her. And hopefully you'll come back also, Dr. Green.
Well,
Myself and Imam Qadir, you're the type of person that we love to have because you just bring so much expertise, you bring so much warmth, and you're a freedom fighter, you know. And we all should strive to be freedom fighters, you know, because that's the
I've
thing.
tried to.
Oh, you are, you know.
I always tell people this, that my great grandmother was born enslaved.
Is that right?
Yeah, and she lived a very long life, and so I always feel her presence within me.
That's right, and we'll continue. Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us. Until next time, peace be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum.